So what comes to your mind when you hear the word Antarctica? Most likely, cold, snow, ice, and penguins. Yet, this is one of the least explored regions in the world that hides many strange and unique things. Check them out. You don't have to go to Antarctica to see this weird thing. All you need to do is open Google Earth and move to one of the southernmost islands of Antarctica, King George Island. Recently, internet users have noticed a large and pretty strange cave entrance there. Where does this wide, dark passage lead? People started making suggestions. It's the entrance to a secret base or some laboratory. This is the part of the spaceship that crashed there thousands of years ago. This is the door to the ancient city of Antarctica. Perhaps there's a giant rock mountain with an ancient cave beneath all this snow and ice. Well, there's some ideas. Users have calculated the approximate dimensions of this cave. It might be about 74 feet high and 250 feet wide. You could hide a Boeing passenger jet in there. Nature probably created this entrance. This is a logical explanation, but there are two strange factors. First, take a look at the foot of the mountain. It seems that there are steps there. They're dark in color, as if they're made of stone. And if you look closely, you can notice something similar to human footprints. Has anyone entered this cave? Or maybe someone is still living there now. The second oddity is the disappearance of the mysterious finding. For the first time, people noticed it in a Google Maps snap in 2007. Then the entrance disappeared. Then it reappeared a few years later. After that, it vanished. And in 2022, people saw it again. Perhaps old snow melts, a new layer falls, and then the wind blows it away and the cycle repeats. But the alleged steps leading deep into the cave make one doubt the natural origin of this tunnel. You can easily find the coordinates on the internet and visit the cave via Google Earth. You might see something there and tell the world. There's another strange thing people discovered with the help of Google Earth. In 2020, one user found a strange object that looked like a giant ship 100 miles off the coast of Antarctica. It was covered with ice and snow and lying on its side. It looked like a cruise ship. You could notice the windows, the deck, and the bridge. But not all people agreed with this. Some claimed it was a spaceship. Others said it was some kind of secret building. The user who first noticed the ship stated that its size was about 400 feet, which is the perfect length for a passenger vessel. But what is this ship doing in such a remote place in the middle of a glacier? How did it get here? Who was its captain? No one has found the answers to these questions yet. In 2016, people using Google Earth discovered a photo of an unknown sea monster floating off the coast of Antarctica. This creature resembled a giant squid with a length of about 200 feet. This is slightly shorter than 3 train cars. Just imagine this kraken swimming in Antarctica's dark, icy waters and dragging to the bottom everything it meets on its way. Maybe it's the great and terrible Chulu, or one of its offspring. You will quickly notice this blood-red waterfall among Antarctica's endless, dazzling white landscapes. Don't worry, it's not blood. For many centuries, the waterfall has been painting snow in a bright red color. The stream flows straight out of a white iceberg. Let's look inside and find out what's happening there. Millions of years ago, there was a small crystal-clear pond, but then a glacier formed around it. A thick layer of ice and snow blocked sunlight, heat, and oxygen access. For millennia, the reservoir remained in this cold vacuum. But at one point, the water made a hole in the icy wall and broke out. When this salty water comes into contact with oxygen, it immediately turns scarlet or rusty. Antarctica is the only place where you can find such a unique natural phenomenon. One of the driest places on Earth is located in Antarctica. It's one of the most lifeless deserts in the world, the McMurdo Dry Valleys. In this desert, you won't see the scorching sun, hot sand, and cacti. A desert means a place with a lack of precipitation and life. The McMurdo Dry Valleys meet these parameters. But this place is also unique for Antarctica, since you won't find glaciers there. Despite the frost, ice can't form in the desert because it hasn't rained for millions of years there. It also never snows. A strong wind coming from the mountains reaches speeds up to 200 miles per hour. It would be difficult for you to stay on your feet there. The wind is filled with moisture. It heats up and evaporates all the liquid and snow in the desert because of its high speed. Only dry air reaches the ground. But you can find several lakes there. They don't freeze, only thanks to the high concentration of salt. The water is so salty that large life forms can't develop there. But scientists have found microscopic organisms near the lakes. 20 million years ago, Antarctica was filled with swamps and trees and swarming with insects and animals. But now, it resembles the surface of Mars, literally. Scientists and astronauts are exploring such regions as the McMurdo Dry Valleys, since the natural conditions there are similar to those on the Red Planet. So, before you go to Mars, you can practice living in similar places on Earth. Also, scientists discovered an underwater world in the Antarctic filled with hundreds of amphipods, crustacean animals similar to shrimp. Wait a minute, it happened in the Antarctic? But the McMurdo Dry Valleys are located in Antarctica. Well, the words are very similar, but what is the difference? Oh, and don't forget the Arctic. The Antarctic is the region in the southernmost part of Earth that houses the continent of Antarctica, and the Arctic is another land altogether. They have the same natural conditions, frost, ice, and snow, but they're located in different parts of the planet. The Arctic is at the North Pole, Antarctica is at the South Pole. Now, back to the discovery. Scientists put forward theories that the ice of the Antarctic hides a vast network of freshwater rivers and lakes, and in 2022, they found a new ecosystem. Researchers explored the Antarctic Ross Ice Shelf and its underwater rivers. This is a massive piece of ice floating in the ocean. A team from New Zealand used a special drilling rig equipped with a hot water supply to drill a hole 1,640 feet deep. That's more than the height of the Empire State Building. Then, they lowered some video cameras and saw thousands of crustaceans swimming in different directions. So it seems they're very unorganized. In the waters of the Antarctic, you can also meet some of the scariest creatures on the planet. These are sea spiders. They got this name because they resemble land spiders, but they're actually a species of marine arthropods. And unlike land spiders, those in the ocean are much larger. They look like 8 strong legs without a body. One such spider can be a dinner plate in width. Some of them have no eyes and have proboscises instead of jaws. Sea spiders are poorly studied because they live in deep, cold waters. Antarctica hides many little-known animals. There are long tunnels in its glaciers leading to scary darkness. On this cold continent, people have found the remains of giant dinosaurs and other ancient creatures, such as the ancestors of modern ducks. Many underground rivers and lakes hide unexplored wildlife. Even the ice here can be weird. Take a look at these striped icebergs. They have blue, black, green, and turquoise shapes. The color depends on the conditions of the water during freezing. For example, green lines appear because of algae. Blue ones form when the water freezes too quickly. Okay, I'm freezing. Time to go thaw somewhere warmer. Hawaii. Yeah.
This sleek, state-of-the-art submarine named Ran was sent to explore the depths of Antarctica. But as soon as it discovered something, it mysteriously disappeared. So, what happened? It all started when scientists wanted to explore one of the most remote and mysterious places on Earth, the Dotson Ice Shelf in West Antarctica. This ice shelf, silent giant, stretches 30 miles wide. That's almost the length of New York City. It stands between 2 icy promontories, the Martin and Bear Peninsulas, and it hides an entire world of geological mysteries. If you think that Antarctica is nothing but a desert of super thick snow and ice, you're wrong. There are entire landscapes hidden deep down there. The underside of the Dotson Ice Shelf is a rugged, dynamic terrain shaped by the slow, relentless forces of nature. There are towering ice formations, deep troughs, and bizarre structures stretching for hundreds of feet. Scientists are super curious about it, but as you can imagine, this landscape isn't easy to explore at all. To find out more, we have to scan the area with satellites or try drilling through the snow, trying to collect the big picture, piece by piece. But these methods only gave us vague hints. The real breakthrough happened when scientists came up with the idea to let the submarines explore it. Autonomous submersibles could swoop deep into the icy waters beneath the Dotson ice shelf and tell us what's up down there. These robotic explorers have fantastic advanced sonar systems. It's that thing that bats or dolphins do. They can use sound to see the world. Basically, they send out sound waves underwater, and when those waves hit something like the ice shelf above or the seafloor below, they bounce back to the system. Animals feel how long it took for the sound waves to return and how they changed. And this helped them understand what's located where. For example, clicks that dolphins send out tell them where the fish are. We copied this crazy evolutionary trick and adapted it to our underwater exploration. Only our version is much cooler, with a higher level of precision, so we created detailed maps of the environment. The Rand submarine was one of those robotic explorers. It was named after the Norse deity of the sea. Ran had been meticulously programmed to navigate a treacherous landscape of Antarctica. But even with all this training, its journey led to an unexpected and eerie end. In 2019, Ran was sent to explore the depths beneath the Dotson ice shelf. It was a hero, the first one to go on a mission like this. The team said it was like seeing the other side of the moon. For 27 straight days, it worked tirelessly. It traveled over 620 miles beneath the thick ice. That's like a journey from Paris to Berlin. Ran went further and deeper than anyone could have imagined. At one point, it reached over 10 miles into the glacier's belly, and what it discovered down there was astonishing. Scientists thought there would be some smooth, uniform ice surfaces, but Ran revealed an underside marked by huge cracks, ridges. There were formations that looked like sand dunes, frozen in time. And finally, it found some mysterious swirling and teardrop-shaped patterns. They all looked more like art than geology. This actually tells the story of ice shelves and the ocean around it. Warm water sneaks in under the ice and melts it from below. Sometimes it smooths the ice out, but other times it carves out these weird, uneven shapes that look like patterns and drawings. And some of these shapes are huge, over 1,300 feet long. That's about 3.5 football fields. The reason why they look like swirling doodles is because the Earth spins. It makes the water turn in special ways, bending the shapes and drawing these spirals. It's called the Coriolis effect. Imagine you were on a merry-go-round and tried to throw something like a ball. It would go in a curve, not a straight line. Same thing happens with the water on Earth. Later, scientists found similar patterns in other Antarctic ice shelves, though they weren't as epic as the ones under Dotson. But Ran also discovered something horrifying. Turns out that these warm waters, aside from being great artists, are also a huge danger. The Dotson ice shelf isn't just hanging out serenely on the sea. It's part of a very delicate system and acts as a protective barrier that holds back huge glaciers in West Antarctica. The ice shelf is floating on the ocean, but it's still connected to the land. As warm water sneaks underneath it and the ice melts, the Dotson can't hold on to the land as tightly anymore. The protective barrier starts to weaken, and this lets the glaciers behind it move faster into the ocean. When those glaciers flow into the sea, they add more water, which could cause sea levels to rise, eventually changing our coastlines. Ran stumbled upon huge pockets where the ice was melting at alarming rates, all due to powerful underwater currents. It was like seeing a ticking clock on the glacier. The stakes were high, but luckily the submarine was ready. This time, it managed to return. And then, it worked for 5 more years, helping scientists with tons of useful data. The missions were daunting. There could be periods where Ran slipped into the pitch-black cavity beneath the glaciers, spending 24 hours without communication. But it was mapping every peak and every valley. It gained experience from over 40 missions below ice. Then, in early 2024, Ran went on a mission to the Thwaites Glacier. The mission was bold from the start. This place is also ominously referred to as the Doomsday Glacier. It's called that because it's slowly melting and has the potential to raise sea levels worldwide if it collapses, causing catastrophes everywhere. That's why Rand was dispatched to explore its underbelly, a place that had never been mapped so intricately before. The idea was to uncover the glacier's secrets, study how rapidly it was melting and why. This was Rand's second time exploring Thwaites. During the previous visit, it became the first sub to ever map the glacier's underside. Rand was exploring the depths from 650 feet to 1,650 feet. It sent a lot of data about how the Doomsday Glacier was slowly melting due to warm ocean currents. But while venturing into these icy depths, something went wrong. Out of nowhere, Rand vanished. Without warning, without a trace. One moment it was sending back crucial data, and the next it had slipped into the abyss. No distress signals, no final transmission, and it didn't return to the point it was supposed to. People sent extensive searches, helicopters soared overhead, drones buzzed through the frozen skies, but no sign of the submersible emerged from the glacier's grasp. After a while, Rand's batteries would certainly run away. So at this point, it had definitely been swallowed by the abyss beneath 1,500 feet of ice. That was a huge and sad loss for the scientific team. The scientists at the University of Gothenburg are now looking to replace Rand and continue their important research under Thwaites. To this day, scientists have no idea what happened to it. Some say it may have been trapped in the ice. Others believe it was pulled away by an unseen current. It also might have collided with something unexpected. Whatever the truth is, its disappearance has left scientists stunned, and it looks like the ice shelf will hold on to its secrets a little longer. At least we gained a treasure trove of knowledge from Rand's journey. Scientists keep exploring Antarctica, looking for history that hides under the snow. For example, they discovered that around 90 million years ago, a lush temperate rainforest thrived near the South Pole. They revealed an ancient world far warmer than they ever imagined. Deep in Antarctica, they unearthed fossilized roots, pollen, and spores preserved in the soil. All this shows that there was a swampy rainforest that flourished despite months of polar darkness. All these discoveries changed our understanding of Earth's climate, both in the past and the future.
There's not much to do in Antarctica except scientific work. You could check out the wildlife, like some cute penguins and seals, and you'd get to see the occasional whale swimming around. Antarctica is one of the biggest lands out there that's only inhabited by scientists and researchers from all over the world. These scientists dug a hole through some pretty thick ice to study the ancient air and how the atmosphere cleans itself. They used a special drill and dug a clean cylindrical hole 450 feet below the surface. Some of this ice can be up to 800,000 years old and is a good indicator of what the climate was like in the past. It's like checking out tree rings to determine how old a certain tree is, except it's more complicated than that. After the effortless digging, they decided to drop some ice to the bottom of the hole to see what would happen next. They heard some really unusual sounds. It felt like being on a spaceship traveling through a bunch of obstacles with many rocks smashing into each other. The pitches changed over the quick descent of the block of ice, ranging from high pitch and ending with a low heartbeat-like sound. The scientists were puzzled when they first heard this and dropped some more ice, only to find out that the same type of sounds were being produced, just in different variations. They couldn't tell what was down there, and, more importantly, why these kinds of sounds were produced. Antarctica boasts quite a few volcanoes, many of which are under super thick sheets of ice. Scientists discovered 91 volcanoes and claimed there could be more, potentially making it the most extensive volcanic region in the world. While they were doing regular scientific research, they came across many unmistakable large cone-shaped figures underground. Some were as deep as 2 miles in the ice. Some of the peaks were over 3,000 feet tall and dozens of miles across. But on the surface, it's as plain as a sheet of paper. They may have dropped that block of ice inside an actual volcano that they were standing on, but it's unlikely. Even though the underground volcano presence was discovered by accident, there's a small chance they were actually standing on one where they had their workstation set up. It's more likely that they worked in an area where studying ancient climates is easier and less dangerous than other places. They collect ice samples and study them in a lab. It's like discovering a prehistoric insect embedded in amber millions of years ago when dinosaurs used to roam the land. But instead of little bugs, scientists study ancient dust, air bubbles, sea salts, volcanic ash, and anything else that may have come from the environment. They can practically tell how the climate was during that time. These ice samples might show that Antarctica's western ice sheet melted when the Earth's climate warmed up. If it did, then it's likely to happen again. That would mean sea levels rising, affecting coastal cities and small remote islands. But scientists aren't sure it's true, despite some evidence to back it up. The process of studying ice samples can take a week or even a year, depending on what they find. They crush or melt the sample bit by bit. And like those tree rings, the deeper the layer, the further we go back in time. In order to study ancient bubbles trapped in ice, researchers have to crush the samples under a vacuum hood to keep the air out while extracting the air and putting it in vials. There are various instruments and devices to study the ice samples, but because it's so sensitive to damage, each measurement must be in a clean room setting so that nothing gets compromised. The scientists have to wear proper bodysuits and many layers of gloves and constantly get ventilated. Even something as tiny and insignificant as a fingerprint can ruin a sample. They look for certain patterns to see changes in the atmosphere's composition and temperature. But dropping a few blocks of ice down a hole wouldn't be so bad. The reason why it made such a peculiar sound is the same reason why a moving car sounds different when it's honking than when it's stationary. The scientific word for it is the Doppler effect. It's an obvious change in the frequency of a wave with respect to an observer who is moving relative to the wave source. The effect doesn't mean the frequency of the sound changes, it just shifts. And this can be said about other types of waves, like water and light. But sound waves are the most popular ones when it comes to the Doppler effect. So, when the scientists dropped the ice block down the bottom of the hole, the sound waves traveled back up and bounced around the narrow tube where they drilled. That's why they got the pew pew sound. Let's not forget that this ice block traveled 450 feet beneath us. Oil ships dig holes in the oceanic crust that go thousands of feet beneath the Earth. The Kola Super Deep Borehole in Russia is the deepest hole ever made by humans. It goes more than 40,000 feet below the surface and took almost 20 years to reach 7.5 miles. Below it is only half the distance to the mantle. In terms of the whole Earth, this very deep hole is literally scratching the surface. This wasn't a hole to dig for oil, and wasn't in the ocean either. The drilling was stopped in 1992 when the engineers found out that the temperatures were 100 degrees Fahrenheit higher than they predicted. And then it was abandoned, and it's just been a barren hole now. But that's the closest we've dug to the center of the planet. The scary thing is that some of the workers on the site could hear voices coming from within. All the way in Yemen, an ancient hole exists in Barhout, in the east of the country in the middle of the desert. It's actually closer to Oman than to the capital Sana'a. This hole has puzzled experts and locals. Unlike the holes in Russia and Antarctica, this wasn't man-made. Or was it? It's been around for many years, and the locals try to steer away from it. They don't even like talking about it, since they claim it brings bad luck to those around it, or to whoever utters its name. They claim it was created as a prison for spirits, but many rule that out. The hole is 98 feet wide and somewhere between 330 to 650 feet deep. You can also hear strange sounds coming from the inside. But according to some scientists, the well has little to no ventilation and barely has any oxygen down there. So it's unlikely that anyone or anything lives down there. The Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench caught some low-pitched grumble sounds in March of 2016. Some of these grumbles were followed by screeches. They caught these sounds in a span of weeks, using a titanium-encased microphone so that the immense pressure of the lowest point on Earth wouldn't crush it. They had to lower it slowly as well, since it's 1,000 times the atmospheric pressure at sea level. For 23 whole days, the microphone recorded typical sounds of whales passing by and boats sailing across from above, and even rumbles of nearby earthquakes, but they still couldn't determine what caused those initial sounds. The researchers couldn't understand if the noise from the bottom of the Mariana Trench was caused by humans or was natural. They also wanted to know if these sounds affected marine life, like dolphins and whales that rely on echolocation. They still can't figure it out, but scientists estimate that the ocean is about 10 times noisier than it was 50 years ago. With technological developments in shipping, submarines, and underwater construction, the ocean will only get louder with time. Northern lights come with sounds, which nobody talks about. They're usually audible when the auroras are at their most powerful presence. Scientists were always puzzled as to what caused the faint popping and crackling, even though they were very far above us. They used some special microphones and found out that the sounds came just 230 feet above us, which is pretty low. They're caused by electrical charges gaining power in a specific region of the auroras. The electrical charges are disturbed by magnetic storms that fire up the northern lights. As a result, some tiny sparks are released into the atmosphere, causing the faint crackling and popping noise.
Look at those lush coniferous forests and tundra. What a wonderland. You may have mistakenly thought it's Canada, but it's not. It's Antarctica, about 34 million years ago. So what makes Antarctica this frigid today? It turns out a mix of dropping carbon dioxide levels and some tectonic shuffle played a huge role in transforming this ice-free paradise into the frozen continent we know now. About 50 million years ago, CO2 concentrations were sky high, strutting around at around 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million. But as those levels tumbled down, global temps started to drop, paving the way for the mighty ice sheets that later took over Antarctica. While the CO2 dive was happening, tectonic activity was also working its magic. The big split between South America and Antarctica opened up the Drake Passage, which created the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This powerful current acted like a bouncer, keeping warm air and ocean currents from crashing the Antarctic party, and helping keep things rather frosty. If you mix up Australia and Antarctica, you're not that wrong. These two continents used to be one. If you mix up Austria and Australia, it's much worse. By the way, don't fall for the internet myths and memes. There's no help desk in Austria specifically for people who intended to fly to Australia. Now, look at this magnificent Australian pink beach. It's precious, and not in a figurative sense. Those mysterious pinkish sands are actually garnet, and it's widely used in jewelry. Geologists studied those sands and came to the conclusion that the garnet contained there is older than local mountains. That doesn't make sense, right? In fact, it does. You see, Australia didn't used to be this very detached continent as it is now. Many, many millions of years ago, Australia and Antarctica were part of the supercontinent Gondwana, and glacial erosion released the garnet, which eventually made its way to the beach. These sands formed when South Australia was flat and chill, long before the mountains appeared. Most garnet gets washed away, but this batch has a rich history, tracing back to glacial rocks in the Transantarctic Mountains. So this pink sand comes from an ancient mountain range hidden under Antarctic ice. Not only does Antarctica ice hide gems like garnet, if you look harder, you might find entire buildings. Sounds insane, but this is exactly what a British explorer did. His name is Chris Brown, and he uncovered an entire building beneath the ice. He was traveling to the pole of inaccessibility, and it all started with a bummer. Chris and his son had their plane broken. Suddenly, they spotted a lone bust peeking out of the snow. This place was an old meteorological station. Despite freezing conditions, Chris and his son Micah had a blast exploring. Chris is on a mission to conquer all 7 earthbound poles of inaccessibility and has tackled 5 so far. I guess you already know that Antarctica is the largest desert on Earth, much larger than the Sahara or the Gobi. Still, despite being the driest continent on Earth, it boasts a seriously weird waterfall. Nestled in the mesmerizing McMurdo Dry Valleys, it's 5 stories tall and looks like it's gushing blood. It's even called Blood Falls. It may look outlandish and even frightening, but its nature can be easily explained. The water that creates this crimson cascade was once a salty lake, but over time, it became sealed off from the outside world when glaciers formed on top of it. Now, this ancient water hanging out 1,300 feet below the surface has cranked up its salt levels to 3 times saltier than the ocean. This salt water is also loaded with iron and gets 0 oxygen or sunlight. When the iron-rich water trickles through a crack in the glacier and meets the air, it rusts up, turning dark red. You may have mistakenly heard that no bug species belongs to Antarctica, but it's not exactly true, because there's this tiny Antarctic midge living there. Plus, there are some spiders too. Those aren't your average spiders hanging out in the darkest corners of your apartment. Those are critters lurking in the chilly darkness of the Antarctic ocean floor. These little marine creepers are actually arthropods and can stretch around 20 inches across. As if that wasn't bizarre enough, they also breathe through little holes in their legs. Quick question. What's the color that you associate most with Antarctica? I'm sure it's white. That's my association too. However, Antarctica may look like a slice of watermelon. That colorful snow comes courtesy of a tough little algae called Chlamydomonas nivalis. When things start to warm up during the Antarctic summer, these little guys release their vibrant red and green spores, painting the snow in wild and funky colors. But it's best to steer clear because that snow is not just a pretty sight. It's also toxic and definitely not edible. Searching for fossils is always a blast, but when you're in one of the most remote spots on the planet, it gets even more exciting. A diverse team of scientists recently hit the mother lode, pulling in over a ton of fossils from ancient marine life, dinosaurs, and birds from the late Cretaceous period, about 71 million years ago. Their adventure kicked off with a flight to South America, followed by a 5-day trek through the infamous Drake Passage. Upon reaching Antarctica, they set up camp using helicopters and inflatable boats. You might be thinking, why dig in Antarctica with all that ice? Well, it turns out there are places where rocks pop up, depending on the season. The team went to James Ross Island, located in the Antarctic Peninsula, and they went there during February and March. And that's one of the few parts of Antarctica where in summer, rocks are exposed, and those rocks can come from the age of dinosaurs. The expedition was a success, as they discovered over a ton of remarkable finds. Next up, the fossils will head to Chile before making their way to Pittsburgh's Carnegie Museum of Natural History. Among their discoveries, they found relics dating back about 71 million years, alongside some around 67 million years old, including plenty of snails, clams, and various marine creatures. Yikes! Look at this creepy sea worm. It could live in LA and be a star in a horror movie, but it chooses to call the chilly waters of the Southern Ocean near Antarctica its home. These worms can grow up to 8 inches long and 4 inches wide, but don't let their spooky exterior trick you. Research suggests they might actually be superheroes in disguise, playing a vital role in keeping ecosystems buzzing. Now, see that head? It's not really a head. It's just a retractable throat that helps this toothy creature chow down on its meals. Antarctica has many creepy critters to offer. Let me introduce you to the Antarctic strawberry feather star. It's not like Patrick from SpongeBob, though. It's more like a deep-sea creature straight out of a horror movie. Picture this: 20 wiggly arms, some stretching up to 8 inches, all decked out with these bizarre little bumps. Yikes indeed. Back in 2014, scientists buried 34 seismic monitors in the snow on the Ross Ice Shelf, which is huge. Think of it as an ice slab the size of Texas, just chilling over the Southern Ocean. These clever little machines picked up a nearly non-stop buzzing. Even though our human ears usually can't catch these low-frequency sounds, scientists have worked their magic and made them audible for us. They even shared the creepy audio online. A glaciologist from the University of Chicago says that if you could hear this vibration, it'd sound like a swarm of cicadas taking over the backyard in late summer. But these glacier explorers weren't trying to capture spooky tunes. They're actually on a mission to monitor the Ross ice shelf because things are heating up, literally, and the ice is melting faster than ice cream on a hot day. Ice shelves are like Earth's safety plugs, keeping all that massive ice from surging into the ocean. So what exactly is making all that noise? It's likely just strong winds whipping across ice dunes, creating a kind of natural vibration. Leave it to people wandering on Google Earth to stumble upon the world's newest and weirdest places ever. Like this mysterious pyramid discovered in Antarctica. Soon enough, the internet blew up with all sorts of theories regarding this unusual shape. Could it be a sign from a different life form? Is this pyramid indeed natural, or is it man-made? For starters, it's not the first time we've discovered a pyramid in the Antarctic. The first one was observed by the British Antarctic expedition in the 1910s and kept secret for a long time. Its discovery being kept hidden only added to the mystery. A second such structure was discovered in 2016, which further increased the interest in the matter. The mystery was soon enough deciphered by scientists. These formations are just mountains. They're located near the Ellsworth Mountains, a range over 250 miles long, so they're just mountain peaks that have broken through the ice sheet. As for their particular shape, it's just a coincidence. Pyramids are found throughout nature. The Matterhorn in the Alps and Mount Ballenstinder in Iceland, for example, are quite similar in terms of shape. As for the official name of these peaks, they're called nunataks, or peaks of rock peeking through a glacier or an ice sheet. Antarctica has way more incredible features, like the fact that it's home of 60 to 90% of the world's fresh water. That's because its ice sheet is the biggest on our planet, stretching across 5.4 million square miles. I'll spare you the calculations, but that leaves only 1% of the continent ice-free. Antarctica's ice reaches 2.7 miles thick at its deepest point, meaning half the height of Mount Everest. Should it ever melt completely, our sea levels would rise to roughly 200 feet. It wasn't always this cold, though. At some point in our planet's history, Antarctica had some average temperatures as the city of Melbourne has today. It took a lot of research, but scientists figured out that Antarctica's temperatures could have reached up to 62.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Sure, that was 40 to 50 million years ago, but if you think about it, it was at the same time when dinosaurs roamed our Earth. Time is also different on this icy continent. All the lines of longitude that help us calculate different time zones merge into a single point at the South Pole. Here, there are 6 months of daylight in the summer, followed by 6 months of complete darkness during the colder season. So, scientists working here stay, on average, in the same time zone they've come from. The Blood Falls aren't a chapter of a thriller movie. They are merely a series of waterfalls located in one of the driest regions of Antarctica. They emerge from an underground lake filled with a special type of bacteria. These little organisms use sulfates as fuel instead of sugars, which makes them very intriguing for scientists. The water contained in this lake is so full of iron that it basically just rusts when it meets air. So, the reddish color of the waterfall also gives it its trademark name. The megalodon was the largest predator ever known in our planet's history. In terms of its location, the megalodon lived practically in all waters on our globe, except near the poles. The reason why there are no megalodon teeth found in Antarctica is probably because the gigantic creature was adapted to only warm tropical and subtropical waters. If you plan to visit Antarctica by boat someday, just know you might not get there on a non-metallic boat. The hull of your transportation device must be made of either steel or aluminum to withstand the harsh weather conditions here. Antarctica isn't home to a lot of bugs. In fact, there is only one true species of insect that calls this place home. It's a wingless midge called Belgica antarctica. This fly is so tiny that it only reaches 0.08 to 0.23 inches long, but it's still the Antarctic's largest terrestrial animal. A lot of Antarctic fish also come with an antifreeze substance in their blood. They don't necessarily need it for protection against the cold temperature, but mostly against touching ice. These antifreezes are made up of large glycoprotein molecules. They surround any small ice crystals that may form, making sure they don't spread through the animal's tissues, which could cause a lot of damage. They also create a sort of small pillow blocking the sharp ice crystals, so they're less likely to cause any pain. It also doesn't rain a lot here on this icy continent, but one amazing meteorological quirk of Antarctica is that it's full of diamond dust. This dust is basically small ice crystals that pop out of humid air close to the Earth's surface. Think of it like an icy fog. As they flow through the air and get touched by sunlight, they begin to sparkle, making visitors here feel like they're surrounded by diamonds. It's probably the last place you'd want to go into labor, but in 1978, the first person was born here ever. Emil Marco Palma was its name, and ever since, 10 other people have been born here in Antarctica. There's a lake on this icy continent that is so full of salt, it makes it impossible for it to freeze over, even if temperatures can go as low as 5 degrees Fahrenheit. That's because pure water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Water that has salt in it, or any other substance for that matter, will freeze, but at a way lower temperature. That lower temperature is adjustable depending on the substance itself and the amount that has been placed into the water. Antarctica was the last official continent to be discovered. It remained completely unseen until the 1820s. But it took another 20 years to confirm it was actually a continent and not just a group of icy islands. Just because it's really cold here doesn't mean you can't go on a date here. One December night, an American scientist that was posted in Antarctica logged into a dating app simply out of curiosity. He was certain no other profiles would show up, but to his surprise, he found someone soon enough. Another researcher who was stationed just 45 minutes away, by helicopter of course. They eventually got together and went on the first date in Antarctica ever recorded. Apart from ice, this continent has something else way more abundantly than any other piece of land on Earth: meteorites. If we look at the research done by scientists, meteorites have equal chances of reaching any place on our planet. However, once they go through our atmosphere, the situation is a bit more complex. That's because different climates on our planet, like the humid ones found near the jungle, have a lot of moisture and oxygen, which will corrode most meteorites. The climate in Antarctica is really dry, so the possibility of meteorites corroding is little to none. More so, it's way easier to spot these rocks on the icy white surface of this area than in any other place on Earth. If you're not scared of the cold, you'll surely freak out when you hear about the winds here. That's because Antarctica is for the most part the windiest place on Earth. Wind speeds have been reported here to reach even 200 miles per hour. Discovering hidden places on our planet is extremely exciting. Today, I'm taking you on a trip that you aren't going to forget anytime soon. But suit up, this is about to get very cold. You hop on a plane and land on the ice-covered island of Greenland. An unbelievable view of the Aurora Borealis, aka the Northern Lights, is greeting you. You can't believe your eyes. Your guide tells you how rare this phenomenon is. Usually, people spend days trying to hunt it down. You feel lucky and take your time to appreciate these beautiful dancing greenish lights. You're glad you brought your camera along, aren't you? Between clicks, you learn that the Aurora Borealis is the result of some rather rough events. This spectacular light show occurs when energy particles from the sun slam into Earth's upper atmosphere. On day 2, you continue to explore the place by air. This may not come as a surprise, but Greenland is one of the world's largest islands. This time, on board a helicopter, you can see the infinite icy landscape. In case you're curious, you're now flying over 656,000 square miles of thick ice. Oh, what's that down there? It looks like a family of polar bears. You don't want to get too close, of course. The conditions in Greenland might be too tough for people to live there, but some animal species do very well in this land of ice. Those are reindeer, wolves, and Arctic foxes. On your way to Greenland, you probably made a pit stop in Copenhagen. Denmark is one of the few countries that have commercial flights to Greenland. You didn't know this before, but you find out that the island is actually part of the Kingdom of Denmark. On a map, it's right between the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans. You're lucky to have a local pilot that tells you about the secrets hidden in this scenery. Under this 2-mile thick white surface, there's an entirely different world. A world filled with canyons, meteor-carved craters, and millennia-old plant fossils. You are beyond excited to go visit one of these spots, but of course, you'll have to use your imagination, as all of it is hidden under ice. Believe it or not, nearly 80% of the island's surface is covered with it. The first stop on your tour is Greenland's Grand Canyon. You land not far from it, somewhere in the northern part of the island. You may know that canyons are deep, narrow valleys with steep sides, but I bet you didn't know that the word canyon actually comes from the Spanish word cañón, which means tube or pipe. Now, this Grand Canyon has some similarities with the one in the US. First of all, in size. It's at least 460 miles long and up to 2,600 feet deep in some places. There's a true subglacial valley down there, and if you're wondering how this happened, well, the canyon had probably been formed by a river that had been flowing through Greenland before the ice took over. Oh yeah, Greenland hasn't always been covered with ice. It was once green, no pun intended. Many other icy places on Earth, such as Antarctica, were once covered in greenery. Scientists have figured out that in the past, Greenland was mostly ice-free. With the help of airborne radar, they made amazing discoveries. By the way, ice is invisible to radar technology. If you have trouble believing it, try putting an ice cube inside your microwave. It won't melt or heat up. A recent discovery of fossilized plants allowed researchers to estimate that Greenland used to be much warmer than they could imagine. 2021 research conducted by the University of Vermont found fossils of twigs and leaves, which left researchers very confused. They expected to discover sand and rocks in the deepest layer of ice, but instead, they found some clear proof of rich flora. Judging by what you've seen of the landscape, it's hard to believe that forests were once growing here. Today, you'll find some tundra vegetation on the coastal part of the island, and that's pretty much it. But according to the genetic material found in these fossilized plants, researchers believe the island used to be much greener. It's very likely that there were insect-filled forests with butterflies and beetles flying around, and the average temperature on the island varied from 50 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer to 1 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter. NASA's Operation Ice Bridge has flown over Greenland more than 100 times. This has allowed researchers to create 3D maps of the island and figure out the age of each layer of ice in Greenland's ice sheet. Ice sheets can help answer many scientific questions as they form over the span of thousands of years. They're layers of snow on top of more snow. The snow gets compacted into ice, which in turn creates what we call an ice sheet. Remember those fossils we were talking about? They're believed to be from the Eemian period, which was 130,000 to 115,000 years ago. According to the groundbreaking 3D footage from NASA, we can see 3 distinct climate periods within the ice sheet. The uppermost layer is quite flat and uniform. If you decided to dig deeper, you'd find the layer formed during the last ice age. It's more complex and rugged. The ice there is darker than what you see on the surface. If you let your mind wander, you can picture what this part of the world looked like when mammoths were roaming around. If you kept digging, you'd eventually find leftover ice from the Eemian period I've told you about. Now, canyons aren't the only unusual thing found under ice. If you could sneak a peek under all those layers of snow, you'd see an impressive mountain range and also plunging fjords. In 2017, scientists created a map that showed what Greenland had looked like without all that ice. There was a bowl-like depression in the middle of the enormous island. This depression was most likely an ancient lake. Around it, there was a circle of coastal mountain ranges. This scenery probably resembled the landscapes of modern Patagonia. Big mountains with snowy tops surrounding crystalline lakes. This ancient lake in Greenland is a wonder on its own. Imagine a pit the size of Rhode Island and Delaware put together. The lake is believed to have covered over 2,700 square miles, and back in the day, it was fed by at least 18 different streams. These crystalline blue waters were surely very inviting, and freezing of course. But if you ended up going for a swim, I'd say be careful, as the water could get up to 800 feet deep in some places. On day 3 of your adventure, you discover a true under-ice water park. While you're wandering around the ice-covered island, your guide tells you to be mindful of the cracks in the surface. These cracks are responsible for the modern-day aqua lounge going on down there. Meltwater and rainwater flow down the cracks in the ice all the way down to the riverbeds. This forms a landscape of jewel-like lakes and streams filled with crystalline water. Researchers estimate that about 60 small under-ice lakes exist there. And yes, they're actual lakes. Perhaps one of the most impressive hidden features on this island is a meteor crater. Under the Hiawatha Glacier, you can find a 19-mile-wide impact crater, big enough to swallow the city of Washington. Apparently, a mile-wide iron asteroid struck Earth's atmosphere within the past 100,000 years and chose Greenland as its landing point. If anyone had been around to see it, they'd have witnessed a real show, a white glowing fireball cutting through the sky. Scientists speculate that if it had landed on an ice sheet, it certainly vaporized both water and stone. Someone standing hundreds of miles from the impact site would have heard a deafening thunderclap and experienced hurricane-force winds. But it actually makes sense. The approximate speed of meteors entering Earth's atmosphere is 45,000 miles per hour. For comparison, that is 2.5 times the speed of a spaceship. It's bound to make some noise and leave a huge crater in the ground.
Over millions of years, our planet has changed a lot. Ice ages, shifting tectonic plates, global floods, meteorites. Whole species of animals have come and gone over millennia. At some point in all of this, we humans came along. Now imagine a place that was cut off from the rest of the world for 5.5 million years, possibly much more. A place that no human had ever set foot in before. In 1986, we finally found it, Movile Cave. You head to the airport and buy a ticket to Romania. Next, you rent a car and drive southeast. You're looking for Constanța County, right near the Black Sea. Your phone says you're there, so you stop the car and look around. You're in the middle of a deserted field, nothing but a wide, lifeless plain. Then, you see it. A hole in the ground. As you move closer, you realize it's a shaft that leads deep down into the Earth's crust. Before you descend into the darkness, you take a rope, a hard hat, a powerful flashlight, and an oxygen tank. Don't forget to wear your protective suit and oxygen mask. You climb down slowly and look around. It's pitch dark below you, and you feel a little uneasy. But something's off. The darkness. It's not cold. Warm air wafts up from the depths. Finally, you feel the ground under your feet. You look around and see a lot of tunnels ahead that lead into the depths of the cave. The tunnels are covered with dry clay. Moving forward on all fours, you notice something. The air is getting warmer and wetter. You come out of a narrow tunnel and find yourself in a huge cave with a lake in the center. Now for the hard part, you have to dive in. The moment you get in the water, you get attacked by the smell of rotten eggs. You've just touched sulfide water, and now smelly hydrogen sulfide is everywhere. That's not all. The cave is also filled with carbon dioxide. Normal fresh air on the surface is about 20% oxygen, but here it's only 10%. Not enough for us to survive without our trusty oxygen tank. Still, all those other gases give you a nasty headache. You turn on your flashlight to full power and dive under. Somehow, you need to swim through these narrow underwater rifts. There are a lot of them. It looks like an underwater maze. You're a little worried, but your O2 tank is still pretty full. You squeeze through the rifts and finally find an open area. You freeze. From above, below, from all sides, you start to hear the sound of crawling creatures. The flashlight beam catches thousands of slippery, fast insects. This cave contains 48 species, 33 of which are completely new to us. Strange white snails crawl along the walls, and transparent shrimps, even small leeches, swim in the water. White centipedes with huge whiskers and transparent spiders shuffle around under your feet. There are even 2 species of scorpion, as if you weren't scared enough. Water scorpions, and another kind, as yet unidentified. It's not exactly your typical desert scorpion. Actually, nothing around here looks normal. All the creatures here are white or transparent. They don't have eyes, just long legs and whisker antennas that help them navigate in the watery darkness. It's a sci-fi director's paradise. You couldn't make this stuff up. The deeper you go into the cave, the less oxygen there is. Amazingly, there are even more small monsters running around. The air is all methane and carbon dioxide. These bizarre little things have never seen the sun, never been out of this cave. The spiders, scorpions, and leeches get hungry, right? They feed on smaller creatures, snails and worms. But what do the smallest creatures eat? Just then, you notice something very strange on the surface of the water. There's a gross white substance that looks like foam. You touch it carefully. It's like wet toilet paper, and it tears as soon as you touch it. But it's not foam or paper. It's billions of living organisms, bacteria, called autotrophs. These bacteria make food from carbon dioxide, but they don't make it from the air like plants or trees. They use water. It's called chemosynthesis. These tiny bacteria excrete their unused food, and bigger ones come along and eat it. Then the tiny snails and worms eat the big bacteria. A whole wacky, unique food cycle deep underground in a random cave in Romania. That's why you need that protective suit and mask. It's not just for your comfort and safety. Without the suit, you might accidentally leave behind some human bacteria from your skin or something. It could ruin the delicate balance of life in this underwater world. The underwater cave is too small and dangerous for expensive scientific equipment, so you grab a couple of samples of water, land, and air and get out of there as fast as possible. The cave hasn't been fully explored yet. The Romanian authorities don't allow just anyone to scuba dive on down there. Let's see in a few years. Who knows what else they'll find? You're back at your fancy lab, and you start to understand why that cave is such a big deal. The conditions in Movile are almost the same as in the first years of Earth's existence. Back then, our world was shielded from the sun by a dense atmosphere. It's actually possible that the microbes found in the cave are the same ones that were around way back when life began. These bacteria could turn out to be incredibly useful. They oxidize the dangerous gases, methane, and carbon dioxide. Basically, they make them harmless. Thanks, little guys. Movile Cave isn't the only extreme place on Earth where life still finds a way to survive and thrive. Picture the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Now imagine 10 of them on top of each other. Now imagine drilling down that deep. Got it? Life still goes on, even this far down. There's almost no oxygen there. The pressure is insanely high, and it's hotter than the hottest desert. Welcome to the nematode empire. Nematodes are worms, and these wiggly dudes are tough as nails. When there's no air, no food, or it's just too hot, they transform. It's called the dour stage. It's a state of stasis, of deep hibernation. The worm's metabolism slows way down. It's like they go to sleep for a long time and only wake up when there's enough air or food around, or when it gets cool enough. And you don't have to dig that deep to find these creatures. Nematodes are found all over the world. They live in hot springs, in deserts, high up in the mountains, in the harsh cold of Antarctica, inside animals, and even inside the human body. You don't have to travel to Mars to find out of this world scenery. There are places on Earth that look unreal. The Danakil Depression in Ethiopia is one of the hottest, driest, and most inaccessible places anywhere on Earth. It's a large desert that gets almost no rain, but there's still plenty of liquid around. It sits on 2 active volcanoes, so liquid hot magma often flows up from under the Earth's crust. There are also colorful lakes full of acidic water. The salt from the lakes reacts with volcanic minerals, making bizarre figures that look like the backdrop of a sci-fi movie. Toxic gases and chlorine vapors rise up from the lakes, making it one of the most dangerous places on Earth. You need a gas mask to survive, but life always finds a way. There are living things here, even in a lake so hot that the acidic water actually boils. Microbes live happily in the lakes and surrounding rocks. If something can survive here, who knows? You can find another tough survivor in the Lut Desert in Iran. They've just discovered a new and special kind of crustacean there. These creatures live in small lakes that appear from time to time thanks to desert rains. This species can survive for decades in dry sediments, just waiting for a tiny bit of water. So these are all very small life forms, but are you in the mood for some monsters? Scientists have just discovered them swimming in the waters off Antarctica. Massive sea spiders, huge starfish, transparent shrimp-like things. In 1 month, researchers found about 30,000 sea creatures, many of them never seen before. Who knows what else is down there?
So, what's the longest you can survive without looking at your phone or watch to check the time? My personal record is about 13 minutes. But someone has no trouble living without knowing the time for 63 days. In the summer of 1962, a French chap named Michel Siffre took off his watch and went down into a cave in the French Alps. The then 23-year-old spent the next couple of months in complete isolation and without seeing the sun. And that's how he accidentally became the founder of a whole field of science called chronobiology, or the study of biological rhythms. Michel's original plan was to study an underground glacier he had discovered earlier. He wanted to spend 15 days underground, but then thought it wouldn't be enough to do serious research and decided to stay there for 2 months in the dark. It wasn't the comfiest of vacations, as his feet were always wet, and his body temperature was way lower than usual. He spent his free time reading, writing, thinking about his future, and studying his surroundings. He also slept well and ate when he felt like it. There was a team waiting at the entrance of the cave. They agreed the scientist would let them know when he woke up, ate, and before going to sleep. The team wasn't allowed to contact him, just to record when he was sending signals to make sure he was safe and sound and keep track of his life cycle. Siffre also informed them of his pulse and counted from 1 to 120, 1 digit per second. And that's how they found out his perception of time was seriously off. It took him 5 minutes to finish that task instead of the regular 2 minutes. When the team told him it was time to get out of the cave, he was confident it was only August, but it was already the 14th of September. Siffre thinks it had to do with an almost total absence of light. He had just a little light bulb in the cave. It all felt like one long day to him, and his memory couldn't keep track of what he was doing yesterday or 2 days before. The most important result of his experiment was proving that people, just like animals, do have an internal clock that doesn't depend on the day and night cycles. Siffre didn't stop there and went on dozens of expeditions to spend some time inside caves. 10 years later, he started a 6-month experiment in Texas. All this helped him to find that when people don't have time cues, They switched to a 48-hour cycle, not the 24 one we're used to. It would be 36 hours of activity and 12 to 14 hours of sleep. NASA used the results of his experiments to help astronauts who had short-term memory issues after some time in isolation. Now, in 2021, a Spanish woman beat Cephras cave record. Beatriz Flamini spent 500 days in a cave outside of Granada, with basically no contact with the rest of the world. She insisted that the support crew wouldn't give her any news at all, even if something happened to her family members. The idea of this rough experiment was to test her own limits and also help scientists understand how staying in such extreme conditions affects the human mind and body. During the experiment called Time Cave, Flamini received food from a drop-off point and sent GoPro videos of herself to the support crew. They checked the footage to make sure she was physically and mentally fine. Flamini spent the entire time working out, reading books, painting, weaving, and making food. She didn't shower, but the support team took out her natural waste once every 5 days. At some point, flies filled the cave, but Flamini braved on and continued the experiment. Around day 300, she had to leave the cave and stay in a tent in isolation for about 8 days because of a technical issue. When 500 days elapsed, the support crew found Flamini sleeping. She had lost track of time completely and said it always felt like 4 a.m. to her. She didn't want to leave as she hadn't finished the book she was reading. Although she started hearing things that weren't real and had a strong craving for roast chicken, the extreme athlete never even considered leaving the time cave earlier than planned. Researchers from several Spanish universities will analyze the data from this unusual experiment. Intricate biological rhythms govern our lives, from the smallest cellular processes to the functioning of the entire body. These rhythms regulate various aspects of your physiology, including sleep patterns, body temperature, hormonal balance, metabolism, and cardiovascular activity. Many diseases get stronger during nighttime or in the morning. Shift work disrupts the balance between internal rhythms and external time, so scientists blame it for diseases. Jet lag is a good example of how your internal clock gets out of whack because you move to a different time zone. But light, especially when you catch it at certain times, can help reset your body clock. When you see light at the end of the night, it nudges your clock forward, and early evening light can push it back a bit. It takes about a day for your body to catch up with each hour of time difference. And since our natural body clock ticks around 24.2 hours, it's easier for us to adjust to longer days out west than shorter ones out east. That's why when athletes or researchers live underground for a while, they end up feeling like they're in a time warp. Back in the 70s, scientists found the circadian clock mechanism in a fruit fly. It has to do with different genes. One gene revs up the other, which then puts the brakes on the first gene, creating a swinging rhythm. During the day, when the sun's up, a photoreceptor tells certain parts of the loop to relax. There's a whole complex network of molecules and neurons making sure everything ticks just right. Every living thing's got its own circadian clock, with its own set of clock genes doing the work. Besides light, other stuff, like temperature and food, helps sync up an organism's clock with the outside world. Now, if you're feeling adventurous and want to try cave isolation yourself, how about the deepest one on our planet, Volcanic Cave? It only got this title in early 2018. It was explored step by step, deeper and deeper. The first expedition to this cave in the West Caucasus only explored around 5% of it, but it was already nearly 400 feet. It was obvious there was much more to this cave, with a small entrance diving into the limestone of Earth's crust. Expeditions from all over the world went back there until they finally reached the bottom. The world's second, third, and fourth deepest caves are all nearby, hiding deep in the mountains of the Arabica Massif. It is one of the largest karst massifs on Earth, but it's still not well explored because it's really tricky to get to this area, only accessible up to 4 months of the year because of weather conditions. Going all the way down there is really tricky and takes several days. There are underwater waterfalls with near-freezing water flooding, obstructed entrances, and other surprise dangers. So if you aren't ready for the deepest of them, you could go with the longest one. Mammoth Cave in Kentucky has over 400 miles of limestone labyrinths, already explored, and probably around 600 miles still to discover. Over 500,000 people visit the cave every year as part of organized tours. You can choose between a classical and more extreme version, learn about the cave's cultural history, or attend a concert within its stone walls. You can also enjoy meeting over 100 wildlife species living there. One of the most famous and unusual of them is the eyeless cavefish. It has adapted to the environment without light by no longer growing eyes.
In 1991, somewhere in the lush jungles of central Vietnam, a local logger found a mysterious hole among the foliage and bushes. He looked in there and felt a strong wind blowing into his face. Then, he heard a strange sound from the cave depths and realized that it was the sound of a river. The logger didn't check the cave, but decided to go back there with a flashlight and a rope. When he returned, he couldn't find the cave anywhere. He spent a few years searching for it. Finally, in the 2000s, the logger managed to locate it again. In 2009, he brought scientists to this place. They found out the cave, called Sundong, is the largest in the world. There's so much space here that you'll hear a long echo if you shout. Sundong's main passage reaches 660 feet in height in some places, which is more than half as tall as the Empire State Building. The area of the cave is so huge that an entire New York City block with 40-story skyscrapers would fit in there. There's a deep underground labyrinth under the jungles of Vietnam, hiding 3 of the largest caves in the world, and Sundong is number 1 on this list. The vast space inside is filled with various plants, unique microclimates, and different landscapes. There's a real jungle growing underground. It became possible thanks to the collapsed ceiling in some places. It lets sunlight penetrate there from above. There are huge stalactites 250 feet high on the ceilings and walls, which is more than the length of a passenger Boeing. They've been here between hundreds of thousands and millions of years. Some limestone deposits are more than 450 million years old. It means they've existed since the time long before the dinosaurs. Besides the jungle, there are also many rivers in the cave. They were formed because of rainwater coming down from holes in the ceiling. These rivers are smooth and fast, like slides in a water park. But riding them isn't the best idea, since they can carry you into one of those long labyrinths that the cave is full of. And we still don't know where they're going. You may find yourself in another unknown part of the cave. This is what happened in 2018. 3 divers accidentally discovered new areas in Sundong. The cave turned out to be much bigger than everyone thought. They dove into one of the cave's lakes and reached a depth of 256 feet. At the bottom, they found a separate tunnel. Divers lowered a fishing line with a lead weight there and found out that this place reaches a depth of 394 feet, and the tunnel is more than half a mile long. We still don't know the exact size of the tunnel. Sundong also connects to another huge cave. There are lots of things you can see in Sundong besides underground labyrinths and rivers. You can find spacious rooms with lakes, and you can walk for hours along dark mountain corridors. This place is strikingly beautiful, but dangerous at the same time. And the coolest thing is that you can take a walk here. Since 2013, Sundong Cave has been open to tourists. It's not just an easy walk to take some selfies though. The expedition to the cave lasts for several days. For the first day and a half, you'll explore the 3rd largest cave in the world. And only after that, you'll reach Sundong. The path will take you through rivers, dense jungles, mountains, and rocks. You can meet many exotic birds, monkeys, and other animals. And according to many people, the way to the cave is even more impressive than the cave itself. When you reach your destination, you'll spend the next few days exploring Sundong. Together with other tourists, professional guides, and porters, you'll be sleeping in tents in different places in the cave every day. You'll see some stunning landscapes and, get ready for this, 400 million-year-old majestic fossils. There are also dark rooms with lakes that are good for swimming. Such adventurous expeditions become more popular every year. People who visited the cave call it the most amazing place they've ever seen. Another amazing cave is located in Indonesia, on the island of Flores. It's quite small, but holds amazing things inside. In 2003, a group of scientists discovered ancient artifacts here, including fossils of primitive tools, such as sharpened stones. Scientists realized that hundreds of thousands of years ago, this place was home to our distant ancestors. Then they found a very unusual female skeleton. That woman was only 3.5 feet tall. This is the height of the waistline of an average adult person. That woman had no problems with her spine or with the development of her bones, though. This and other skeletons found in the cave belong to some unknown human ancestors. Scientists called this species Homo floresiensis, or simply, Hobbit. The woman's weight was about 35 to 79 pounds. Analysis of the skull and bones showed she was about 30 years old. Hobbits probably lived on Earth between 190,000 and 50,000 years ago. There's a chance they met the ancestors of modern humans. The next cave is in Turkey. Imagine that you live in an old house and decide to make some repairs. You throw all the old stuff out of the rooms. The last place to sort out is your basement. You've hardly ever visited it and have no idea what's hidden there. But it's pretty spacious, so you decide to turn it into a room. You tear down the wall and discover the entrance to the cave. This is a tunnel that leads underground. You walk through the cave and see a real underground city. This happened in Turkey in 1963. One of the locals discovered a secret passage to a lost city in his basement. About 20,000 people could live there. There was enough space for livestock and food supplies. It's not just a maze of tunnels. There's a chapel, a school, stables, kitchens, walls, and other signs of civilization. The city was built in the Byzantine era, in the years 780 through 1180. It's not the only one down there and is connected to many underground tunnels and towns that stretch for several miles. Let's finish our journey in the strangest and most frightening cave. We're going to the southeast of Romania, near the Black Sea. Here, on a desolate wide plain, you can find a hole. This is a tunnel leading deep underground. The air inside the cave has high levels of hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide. Under normal conditions, the air we breathe contains around 20% oxygen, but it's only 10% here. You won't be able to breathe freely without an oxygen tank. The water and air here are poisoned. Almost no animals are able to live in such conditions, at least the ones we know about. And this cave is filled with 48 species of living organisms, 33 of which are new unknown species. Creeping things that live here can scare you, especially if you're afraid of bugs. Strange white snails and white spiders are crawling along the walls. An unknown species of leeches and transparent shrimp are swimming in the water. White millipedes with huge mustaches are creeping on the ground. Here you can also meet an unknown kind of scorpion with a transparent white body that doesn't look like any other kind of scorpion. Nothing here looks like ordinary animals at all. All creatures in the cave are white or transparent. They don't have eyes, but they have long paws and antennae whiskers that help to navigate in space. Plants can't live here without sunlight and clean air. This means that oxygen isn't produced in this place. So how do these creatures manage to survive? The answer is in the water. The surface of the lake and puddles here is covered with strangely moving foam. This substance is a living organism. It consists of 1 billion bacteria called autotrophs. Ordinary plants absorb carbon dioxide and use photosynthesis to produce oxygen. This cave is filled with carbon dioxide. Autotrophs absorb it and secrete tiny food particles. Bacteria feed on these particles. Larger organisms then feed on those bacteria, and so on. In the end, there's enough food for everyone. This process is called chemosynthesis. It's like photosynthesis, but uses water instead of sunlight in its chemical reactions. In this cave, evolution has created a completely unique biological system, separate from the rest of the world.
47-year-old Kenny Veach told his family he was going hiking for 2 days. His destination? The Mojave Desert. The man wanted to revisit a cave he had discovered during one of his previous hikes. But that was the last time anyone had seen Kenny Veach. A helicopter and over 30 search and rescue teams came back empty. The hiker was nowhere to be found. Was the mysterious M cave behind his disappearance? The oddest thing about Kenny's case is the fact that he was a seasoned hiker. He often went on solo trips to explore deserts in California and Nevada. The man was an ultralight hiker. That meant he brought only the most basic of supplies: water, food, and a tent. That's all. But this was enough for several days of camping in the desert. Kenny would rarely bring a GPS device with him. He didn't even bother to pack a compass or a map. Some would call him reckless, but he managed to get back home every single time. Kenny wasn't shy either. He had a YouTube channel where he regularly posted his adventures. He named his channel Snakebit McGee because he picked up snakes wherever he went. But Kenny also had another habit. He went into every cave he found in the desert. Now, he didn't post many videos. Kenny mostly used YouTube to comment on other people's adventures. In a comment from June 2014, the man revealed that he had discovered a mysterious M-shaped cave. It was located in the Sheep Mountains of North Las Vegas. Kenny's description of the cave is where the weird part of the story begins. He spotted it while hiking and noticed the cave had an interesting entrance. It was shaped like a perfect letter M. Kenny went up to it, but something didn't seem right. He reported that his body started to shake as he approached the cave. The vibrations were so strong near the entrance that Kenny turned back. In his own words, he was scared for his life. It must have really been something if it frightened an experienced trekker. Kenny had an impressive track record. He had been hiking for 20 years. He explored caves other people were too afraid to even enter. Once, he was bitten by a rattlesnake and had to spend a week in the hospital. On his journeys, the man found skulls of all shapes and sizes, as well as old animal traps. Kenny slept on mountain peaks under the stars. One time, he hurt his leg on a mountaintop. He had to walk 20 miles back to his truck. It was 100 degrees Fahrenheit that day, and Kenny had 1 cup of water to keep him going. Kenny Veach was a true survivalist. But this one cave was a mystery to him. He admitted that he was totally unprepared that day. He had the tools to open a can, but not to fight the mysterious force that took over his body. But Kenny wasn't a quitter. He made plans to return to the M cave, and this time, he was going to be ready. He did so several months later, but much better equipped. But the trip turned out to be a bust. He recorded a video, but couldn't find the cave. Was that it? Was the brave explorer finally going to quit? Not by a long shot. His followers on social media wanted him to solve the mystery. So he went out into the desert for the 3rd time. He planned a short, overnight trip, but nobody ever saw him again. After 2 days, his family alerted the authorities. They quickly launched a search for the missing man. Now we come to the weird part. In one of his videos, Kenny stood in front of an abandoned mine shaft. This is where he briefed the viewers on the mission. Rescue teams reached this point and found Kenny's phone. This was 10 days into the search, but the trail soon went cold. The rescuers feared the worst. They decided to send a camera down the shaft, but didn't find anything. For a full month, no one had any idea where Kenny was. And then, the mystery deepened. An unknown woman came forward online. She claimed to be the missing man's girlfriend. The mysterious woman told the story of how she went with Kenny on hour-long hikes. She urged hikers to use GPS not to get lost. And then, a claim that shocked social media users. The woman believed Kenny's disappearance wasn't an accident. She revealed that her alleged boyfriend had some serious issues. Apparently, he had quit his job a year prior to his disappearance. Did Kenny Veach really trek into the desert to take his own life? People weren't convinced. Kenny's daughter believed her father just had an accident. In her words, he was a survivor. Was the mysterious M cave responsible for his disappearance? Did he find someone or something he shouldn't have found there? The questions linger, and so did the theories among the online community. Fellow hikers and YouTubers were determined to find the M Cave. This would solve Kenny Veach's mysterious disappearance once and for all. In 2021, one hiker got lucky. He claimed to have found the secretive M Cave. For safety reasons, the man couldn't reveal his exact location. The cave sits somewhere near Nevada State Route 375 East. The entrance to the cave really looked like an oversized letter M, just like Veach described it. But the shape is too hard to notice from ground level. Only when you look at it from above is the M shape visible. Who knows, hikers might have been walking past it for years without noticing the cave. Even Kenny couldn't locate the entrance the second time he went looking for it. The cave wasn't very deep, but there was something odd at the entrance. There appears to have been a straight line of rocks. Did someone try to wall off the entrance? And at the back of the cave, there was an even stranger find. Small pieces of wood were scattered along the floor. They looked a lot like 2x4s that are used in construction. Was there a door here once? The hiker found a nail sticking out of the stone. It could be part of a latch that was there some time ago. But the strangest part was the writing on the wall. Hatch or Veach? It's hard to tell. The hiker that discovered the cave didn't want to stay to find out. He left the cave in a hurry. No, it wasn't because he felt a strange vibration in his body like Kenny. He just didn't want to be in a desert cave in the middle of nowhere. This is the Mojave Desert, one of the most dangerous landscapes on Earth. Could this setting better explain how Kenny Veach disappeared without a trace in 2014? The desert's nickname is well-deserved. This is where scientists recorded the hottest temperature on the planet. 134 degrees Fahrenheit, and the average temperature during summer, just 113 degrees Fahrenheit, no sweat. But you'll also need a blanket. At night, the air temperatures drop well below freezing. Talk about a climate roller coaster. And the list of dangers doesn't end there. The driest and hottest place in the United States is home to dangerous animals. Mountain lions, venomous lizards, spiders, and wasps. You name it. Any one of these animals can end the life of an unsuspecting hiker. There is a reason why Kenny always wore snake guards when trekking. And then there are mine shafts. Local authorities strongly advise hikers not to enter them. These old mines from the 1800s are highly unstable. A person can easily fall down a hidden shaft. They also have pockets of bad air, which can suffocate a person. And remember the likable wildlife? They too live in these shafts. Rattlesnakes, scorpions, and black widow spiders. Kenny Veach could have easily fallen into one of these shafts, and there would be no help for him from miles around, since Nevada is one of the least populated states.
The moon's surface has millions of craters, but something else has drawn a lot of attention to it. A giant rare hole that turned out to be a tube. It was found when the Japanese lunar orbiter was gathering data around the moon's skylight, the tube's entrance. Researchers found a specific echo pattern that suggested there was a hollow area. They discovered more echo patterns at a couple of places near the hole, so there could be more lunar tubes there. But in this big tube, you could place an entire football field and the pit could swallow it whole. It's irregularly shaped and 427 feet in diameter. Scientists think that there could be secret caves, a tunnel system, or an entire geological wonderland under the surface. It could be a good shelter for astronauts that land on the moon, or even be a harbor for a lunar colony. No one ever managed to stay on the moon for more than 3 days because of the conditions on the satellite. It has a wide range of temperatures, low atmosphere, and no magnetic field that would protect life on the surface from things like radiation or harsh sun rays. Astronauts wear spacesuits, but they can't protect them over long periods of time. But a lava tube could. When a lava flow cools, it gets a hard crust, which later thickens and creates a roof over that same lava. It continues to flow, but when it stops, the channel can drain, which results in an empty tube. Our planet also has lava tubes, but they're not as big as the one found on the moon. There's a special type of tree called a moon tree. It's grown from seeds that were taken into space during one of the missions and then returned back to Earth. You can find this kind of tree growing across the US. Earth is 27% bigger than the moon and far more massive. Our gravity is stronger. If If you drop a rock on the Earth, it will fall faster. 150 pounds on Earth is just 25 pounds on the Moon. The Earth has numerous satellites circling around it, but the Moon is the only natural one. Our Moon was formed during a big collision of the Earth and one more planet the size of Mars. This happened around 4.6 billion years ago, shortly after the Sun and our solar system were formed. After the collision, a cloud of vaporized rock went into orbit around our planet, cooled, and shaped into a ring of small solid bodies. They later got together and became the Moon, leaving craters as a reminder of this collision. If you're standing on the surface of the Moon, your shadow will be darker than on Earth. This is because there's no atmosphere to scatter light and create lighter shadows. One of Jupiter's moons, Io, has hundreds of volcanoes and pretty wild eruptions, sometimes sending plumes 250 miles into the atmosphere. These eruptions happen because of the extremely strong gravity this moon is exposed to. Its insides tense up and relax in those periods when it gets closer to and then further from Jupiter, which generates enough energy for insane volcanic activity. It's not just planets, even quite small space bodies sometimes have moons. In 1993, researchers discovered a 20-mile wide asteroid and its 1-mile wide moon. You'd need 400,000 moons to match the brightness of our central star, the Sun. The moon reflects the light it gets from the Sun, but it doesn't produce its own. That brightness depends on the angle between the moon, the Earth, and the Sun. Our moon is around 32 Earths away from us, and 29 Earths at its closest. When the night is dark and clear, it seems like you can touch a full moon. But if you wanted to do it, you'd have to travel up to 250,000 miles. Still, there is water on the moon. Not puddles or lakes, but grains of water ice exist in permanently shadowed parts near the moon's poles. Scientists think that water got on the moon a long time ago, during a period when both the moon and Earth were constantly struck by asteroids and comets, which contained water ice. This process may have even helped us get our own lakes and oceans, not just the moon's icy water. Newer research says that the moon's interior already had water, and it went to the surface during volcanic activity. The same might have happened on our planet too. Out of 200 moons in our solar system, our moon is the 5th biggest one. Jupiter's moon Ganymede is the biggest one, almost 1.5 times bigger than ours. Apollo 11 was the mission where humankind first landed on the moon. It was a very important moment, broadcast all over the world. But it was almost interrupted by a huge windstorm that was going on in Australia back then. Parker Dish was placed there, which was something we used to get the broadcast signals from the moon. The moon is not a perfect circle. It's more in the shape of an egg, with the thicker end pointing toward us. This shape is derived from its rotation. A full moon can keep you awake. Studies showed that people experienced less deep sleep, and it took them longer to fall asleep during the full moon period. It wasn't about its brightness, but the lunar cycle that influences our internal body clock. Each year, the moon is moving away from Earth because of the interaction between the moon's gravitational force and our oceans. In 1 year, it moves around 1.5 inches away, which means that in around 600 million years, it will be 14,600 miles further from Earth than it is now. This number isn't accidental. That's the time when total solar eclipses will stop happening. Humankind hasn't set foot on the moon in a few decades, but footprints there are still fresh because there are no winds up there, so these tracks can stay there for millions of years. The moon has its own time zone called Lunar Standard Time. Time is different on the moon, so a year there is divided into 12 days, considering each is as long as our month. Days got named after astronauts who walked on the moon. The moon calendar starts the moment Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon in 1969. There are possible energy sources for living beings on one of Saturn's moons. It has an ocean under the surface, and it may feature some chemical reactions similar to those that help certain forms of life on our planet survive. The moon used to have active volcanoes, probably during the time of the dinosaurs. Molten lava hardened on its surface billions of years ago, which helped create unique lunar craters, but the volcanoes have been dormant for a long time now. The moon has earthquakes, or rather, moonquakes. Just like our planet, the moon also has a crust that goes through changes and shifts. Shaking occurs when its crust warms and expands, or it can even be caused by meteorite impacts. Moonquakes are not as strong as earthquakes, but can last way longer since the moon doesn't have enough water to prevent seismic vibrations. The moon has a big range of temperatures because it doesn't have an atmosphere. During the day, it can go up to 200 degrees Fahrenheit, but at its poles, the temperature is around -400 degrees Fahrenheit. In 2019, astronauts discovered a strange space phenomenon. The moon was crossing in front of the sun, and at one moment, it seemed like it stopped and then started moving backward. It's the same optical illusion like when you're driving on the highway and pass a car that's slower than you. At one moment, as you move ahead, it may appear like it's going backward. The crust of the moon is not equally thick in all its parts. Some are up to 37 miles thick, while others are much thinner. The moon itself doesn't change colors. When sunlight goes through our atmosphere, it reflects off the moon and makes us see it as pink or red. Sometimes there are particles of dust sent into the atmosphere, and in combination with sunlight, they give the moon an orange glow. The moon doesn't have a dark side. There's only a far side that we can't see from the Earth. The moon spins on its axis once and makes a circle around the Earth, all in the same amount of time, which is why we only see its one face the entire time. All planets in our solar system have at least one moon, except for Mercury and Venus. Mercury has less mass than our planet, so its gravity is lower than ours, around 38% of the Earth's gravity. That means 100 pounds on Earth would be 38 pounds on Mercury. Because of the weaker gravity, and since it's so close to the Sun, Mercury wouldn't be able to have its own moon. It would probably crash into Mercury, or even go into orbit around the Sun, and someday even get pulled into it. Venus most likely doesn't have its moon because it's also too close to the Sun.
A comfortable abode with a gorgeous view of the Mediterranean Sea will serve as a perfect rain shelter. Well, this is what a real estate advertisement might have looked like for Neanderthals 100,000 years ago. Welcome to the weird and wonderful caves you could live in, or not. Of course, back then, neither real estate and advertising had been invented yet. Never mind the fact that Neanderthals couldn't build houses and often lived in caves. Yet, one of those caves looks an awful lot like a residential building. It's situated inside a high limestone cape called the Rock of Gibraltar. If the Neanderthals had had an economy, the caves inside this rock would have cost a bundle. Navigators discovered it in 1907. They just spotted a big hole inside the fortified rock. For many years, scientists have studied this place and found some traces of Neanderthals. They discovered ancient tools in the cave and bones of old animals. But the coolest thing was, they found 4 caves inside the rock. It was like a residential complex. Neanderthals lived alongside neighbors and helped each other hunt and fish. They created feather decorations and painted abstract drawings on the walls. Imagine our ancient predecessors hanging out in these caves 100,000 years ago. And now, scientists hang out there and study the primeval past of Neanderthals in detail. At the end of 2021, archaeologists uncovered a gap inside one of the caves leading to an unknown tunnel. They crawled through this hole and opened a new space under the cave roof. This place has been closed off from the outside world for over 40,000 years. And it seems it was one of the most prestigious apartments in the entire mountain complex. It has high ceilings with ancient stalactites. The ruined stone curtains divided the apartment into several rooms. Scientists also found the remains of ancient animals and scratches on the walls. It seems that Neanderthals had never lived here, but they used to visit this place. Archaeologists found the shell of a sea snail called dog whelk. One of the Neanderthals brought it here for some reason, but the primary owners of this place were hyenas. These caves show that Neanderthals were closer to humans than to monkeys. They had a way of life and even some customs. There's still a lot of work ahead, and scientists hope to find new rooms inside this rock. Meanwhile, in 2003, archaeologists discovered another early dwelling on the Isle of Flores in Indonesia. Among the green jungle, they found a cave with ancient tools. At first, everyone thought the human ancestors lived here, but then scientists discovered an unusual skeleton of an adult. A thorough analysis showed the skeleton belonged to a 30-year-old woman, 3.5 feet tall, just above the waist of an average adult. The woman's weight was equal to the weight of an adult shepherd. The skeleton didn't belong to Neanderthals or Australopithecines. It was a new unknown species, which scientists called Homo floresiensis, or simply the Hobbit. Also, there were remains of unusual ancient animals in the cave. It was an elephant the size of a cow, some large storks, and giant rats. Archaeologists have found out that hobbits were not the owners of this place. The main inhabitants were the rats the size of a cat. Maybe they were fighting the hobbits. Some analysis shows that Homo floresiensis wasn't our direct ancestor. They were in a separate branch of evolution. The hobbit skeleton looks more like that of a monkey than of modern humans. In 2009, in the dense jungle of Vietnam, archaeologists discovered Son Don, the largest cave in the world. If you go inside the cave and shout, you'll hear your echo a long time. In some places, the height of this cave reaches half the height of the Empire State Building, and the total area is larger than one central block of New York. Son Don is one of the 3 caves in the Vietnamese jungle. Many intricate mazes connect these caves. Inside, you can find unique plants and trees that live separately from the outside world. It's a real underground jungle. In some places, you can find collapsed ceilings that let the sunlight in. Besides unusual trees and plants, ancient stalactites hang there. Some limestone deposits are more than 450 million years old. They were here even before dinosaurs appeared. There are also many rivers in the cave. Rainwater coming down from holes in the ceiling has formed them. Fast streams resemble slides in a water park. They lead to unknown underground labyrinths. Scientists have studied only a small part of all these caves. The next unusual cave is in New Zealand. Hundreds of thousands of fireflies live inside. Each of them glows with a blue light. Together, they light up the cave. It may seem to you that you're on another planet, but you can't stay there for a long time. Special air measuring devices are everywhere. Scientists monitor the level of carbon dioxide necessary for the normal existence of fireflies. These insects are sensitive to the environment. If there are many people in the cave, or they stay there too long, the park staff will ask them to leave the place. It's like you're literally stealing oxygen from the fireflies. We've seen some pretty amazing caves so far, but how about a scary one? We're going to the desert of Yemen's Al-Mara province. What we're looking for is not a cave, it's just a black hole in the ground, right in the middle of the desert. It's big, the size of a basketball court. It's not its size that could scare you, but what's inside. Scientists are still not sure what it is. From the depths of this black abyss, a disgusting smell of rotten eggs constantly comes out, and sometimes you can hear some strange, frightening sounds. The blackness of the giant hole in Yemen absorbs all the sun's rays, so you won't see what's there even with a powerful flashlight. People flew over this place by helicopter. They filmed using drones and the most powerful lenses, but they didn't catch anything except darkness. It looks like a big ink spot in the middle of golden sand. The locals are afraid to approach this place. They believe the cave leads to another dimension where evil creatures live. At the moment, the giant hole in Yemen is one of the most poorly studied and mysterious phenomenon of nature. How did it appear? How old is it? Where does it lead? Scientists are trying to find the answers to these questions. There are theories that the hole appeared because of construction work. Geologists drilled the soil nearby in search of minerals. It could have caused fluctuations in the Earth's crust and collapsed the surface. But no one can prove this theory, yet. And now, imagine a place where sunlight has not penetrated for more than 5 million years. There's little oxygen, and it's cold and damp. Still, life is born in this place, not only microbes and bacteria, but also something bigger. The living conditions in this cave are very different from the usual ones, so, in a sense, this cave is like another planet. It's the Movile cave in the southeast of Romania, near the Black Sea. The entrance is a small hole in the ground. Inside, a tunnel leads deep below the surface. The levels of hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide are above normal inside the cave. The air here is half as much oxygen as on the surface. People can't be here without an oxygen mask. but other creatures living here can. The cave is home to 48 species of living organisms. 33 of them are unknown. Here you can meet some unusual insects, white snails and white spiders, millipedes with huge whiskers, transparent shrimp, and unique species of leeches. They all live here thanks to the little bacteria autotrophs. They absorb carbon dioxide and release food particles. Bacteria feed on it. Other larger organisms feed on these bacteria, and some bigger organisms eat those little ones. In the end, everyone gets food. In this cave, evolution has created a biological system separate from the rest of the world.
The Javari Valley in Brazil is an untouched jungled area of 33,000 square miles, slightly larger than Austria. This place is protected to stop outsiders from entering. This isolated area is home to one of Brazil's largest indigenous territories. Here, uncontacted tribes with no understanding of the outside world can live peacefully in the jungle. Observation is only made by officials from the air. It provides a small glimpse and a better understanding of how early hunter-gatherer societies once lived. Up to 3,000 inhabitants within 14 different tribes live deep inside the reservation in up to 19 villages. This makes the Javari Valley one of the largest concentrations of isolated peoples in the world. It's illegal for outsiders to enter this area, as contact with outside humans would be volatile to the natives' health. These remote tribes haven't evolved an immunity to the many bacteria that we have, so it's crucial they are left alone. Within the Vatican, there is a massive secret storage room. It contains up to 52 miles of shelving for archives that date as far back as the 8th century. It contains many significant letters, books, and other documents from notable people collected by the Vatican. One letter from Abraham Lincoln here is from the 1860s, discussing the progress of the USA with the Papal States. Another is from Queen Mary of the Scots when she sought help from the Pope in 1587. And there are even documents regarding the trial of Galileo in the 17th century, as he questioned the true movements of the Earth moving around the Sun. There are 1,200 years of documentation regarding world events. However, most of it is secret, as access is only provided to academic researchers. And to be one of those, you will need to be the minimum age of 75 and must renew your request for access to the room every 6 months. And even then, while you poke through the secret documents, you are under constant supervision of the Swiss Guard. With so much secrecy, it would be interesting what else could be hidden in these confidential documents. Halfway between Hawaii and Australia lies the lonely Howland Island. It has a long history of being an isolated and unforgiving location. Since 1857, miners spent 2 decades extracting bird droppings that were centuries old, a valuable fertilizer at the time. The island was abandoned until 1935, when the USA attempted to make a colony there. They were excited to build its first airport. They expected it would one day be a great location for a stopover flight, creating an easier connection from Australia to California. A flight path had even been prepared on Howland Island for the arrival of Amelia Earhart. It was all set up as a landing point for her circumnavigational flight of the globe. Unfortunately, Amelia lost contact before making it to the Isle. The dream of the airport to be used on the Trans-Pacific flight path was abandoned, and the colony soon dispersed with no further attempts to repopulate it. But the island is now a protected reservation for the fragile ecosystem that surrounds it. It's visited once every 2 years to assess the regeneration of wildlife, and no one is allowed to enter without official authorization. Heard Island is an offshore territory of Australia. 80% of it is covered in ice, and it has the country's only active volcanoes. It's also surrounded by glaciers, with the highest descending to sea level from 7,900 feet. If you're lucky enough to gain authorization to access the island, you can do this only by sailing 4,000 miles across rough seas. After you've successfully sailed the long voyage, you'll find yourself in this uninhabited 142 square mile territory. Congrats! You've made it to one of the most isolated places in the world. Only whalers and sealers sometimes lived here until the 1880s. And since these whalers left, only researchers have made the daring voyage. Since 2011, no one has returned. All the buildings have broken down over the years from the extreme weather, so it's not the best option for a vacation. With freezing temperatures and powerful winds that can reach 110 miles per hour, only the hardiest of plants and animals can survive this place. In France, there's a network of caves called the Lascaux Caves that provides artwork that is truly unique. Wall paintings that date back 17,000 years ago from the early Magdalenian age provide around 6,000 images. They decorate the walls, giving a great insight to what types of animals existed in that ancient period. Some of the animals portrayed have been extinct in France for thousands of years, like the ancient aurochs and rhinoceros. Painted in a mixture of red, yellow, and black colors, made from several different mineral pigments, the pictures depict what hunter-gathering societies hunted from the region. But the ingredients were vulnerable from tourists' visits, which were then stopped in 1963. The carbon dioxide from the visitors' breath and presence of light caused lichens, crystals, and molds to appear in the caves, which provided potential damage to the minerals of the paintings. These caves are now heavily restricted for entry, but replicas of the paintings have been made available to provide a similar experience. Canada is the second largest country in the world, although the northwestern part is mostly unpopulated. One island in this area, Devon Island, is the largest uninhabited island on the planet. It covers a massive area of 12,000 square miles, almost the same size as Croatia. People struggled to live in this desolate land. The Inuits tried for a while, but even they decided to give up on this unforgiving land in the 1930s. With low precipitation on the island, harsh winds, and freezing temperatures, it can only support microclimates of vegetation. Settlements were also abandoned in 1951, since they weren't economically viable with the limited resources Devon Island had to offer. However, today, due to its similarities with Mars, scientists make the difficult journey to research the island. The environment is very difficult to live in, with its poor terrain, freezing temperatures, and isolation. So, it's become a perfect match for NASA to test equipment and crew for future missions to Mars, the Moon, and even asteroids. Halfway between the North Pole and the northern coast of Norway sits the Svalbard archipelago. This isolated island is covered by snowy tundra. It's virtually unlivable here. But as you make the long journey, trekking through the snow, you might be lucky to reach the Svalbard Vault, poking out of a mountain. After accessing its daunting entrance, you follow through a long tunnel deeper into the mountain. You can hear constant noises from the cooling system all around you. This is to make sure the temperature is at a cool negative 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect for the contents it's preserving. As you reach the end of the tunnel, you enter the Svalbard Global Seed Vault. This is basically a safety deposit box holding the world's largest collection of agricultural biodiversity. Since its opening in 2008, 13,000 years of agricultural history have been accumulated, with over 1 million separate distinct crop samples stored here. The purpose of the vault is to provide a backup against any accidental loss of crops throughout the world. The 148 countries who deposited into the vault can withdraw when they need to. However, it is heavily restricted, with only authorized personnel accessing the seeds within. In Brazil, there's an island just 21 miles from the coast. It's one of the most dangerous islands in the world. Filled with a lot of snakes, it's aptly named Snake Island. Golden lancehead snakes became marooned on this island when it separated from the mainland during the last ice age. From their isolation, they adapted to their surroundings, growing in numbers, and their venom becoming more potent with whatever prey they could find. Their venom is up to 5 times more powerful than their mainland cousins. And with the island the size of only 43 hectares, it's home to 4,000 venomous snakes. That's at least 1 snake per square foot. The island is restricted due to the highly venomous residents. Only officials and researchers observing the snakes are allowed access. But if you happen to be sailing by and your boat sinks, there's a number to call just in case. Just don't leave the beach.
You know, scientists make discoveries that change the world, but even they can face mysteries. Here are 10 things that have baffled scientists. Imagine that you constantly hear a low-frequency hum, and no one can trace its source. Roughly 4% of the world's population hears the hum. It's a geography-free sound. I mean, people all around the world hear it, so the name varies from Tao's hum to Auckland hum, depending on the region where it gets generated. The sound is just on the threshold of human hearing. People hear it less when they're outside, and it gets louder indoors, especially at night. What's even scarier is that you cannot unhear it once you've heard it. Some folks say it started in London around the time of Charles Dickens, who wrote A Christmas Carol, and the low-frequency sound actually comes from the humbug. Or not. Actually, the earliest cases were recorded in Bristol, UK, dating back to the mid-1970s. Scientists have various theories about where the hum comes from and why only some people can hear it. Yet they don't have a clear answer. It could occur when ocean waves move along the ocean floor. They shake the Earth when they collide with continental shelves. Or this might be happening because of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. Oh, and how about ultra-low frequency radio signals used to communicate with submarines or even 5G? Upsweep is another type of unidentified sound. It was discovered in 1991 in the Pacific Ocean. The sound is high enough to be recorded throughout the ocean. Scientists theorize that the sound could be related to underwater volcanic activity. Interestingly, the volume of the sound has been diminishing compared to its volume when it was first discovered, yet it still can be detected. Plus, it's seasonal. It reaches its highest volume in spring and fall. Is it related to seasonal changes? No one really knows for sure. The next mysterious thing is a cone-shaped monument found in the Sea of Galilee in Israel. This monument was discovered accidentally by sonar scanning in 2003, but the findings were published only in 2013. The monument weighs 60,000 tons. It was once submerged by rising waters. Archaeologists say the monument is enigmatic because they can't figure out where it's from. They don't know what it's connected to or its function. So this big and unusual thing remains a mystery. Now let's move to Göbekli Tepe, Turkey. This place offers you one of the most archaeologically significant sites in the world. Why is it important? Well, it has massive carved stones about 11,000 years old. To put it in perspective, they're 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. Ancient people placed these stones before they began farming or crafting metal tools or pottery. So the existence of this place goes against the chronology of civilization we're familiar with, where people farmed first and built second. Apparently, it wasn't like that. In any case, a good question is, what was the purpose of this site? Was it built to worship some spirits? Yep, archaeologists believe it might be the world's oldest temple. Okay, say this with me. Paleodictyon notusum. Yeah, I know it sounds like a chemical formula. This is a living fossil found deep down on the ocean floor. A creature makes these hexagonal burrows, that for sure. Yet scientists can't identify the artists. Now, what do I mean by living fossil? Well, Paleodictyon notusum is a creature believed to produce a burrow nearly identical to Paleodictyon fossils. Is it a worm-like animal that made them? Scientists don't know. One thing is clear. This isn't some random stuff created by geological forces. Now, speaking of fossils, take a look at this giant one. Its informal name is Godzilius. It was discovered in 2011 by an amateur paleontologist. This is a scientist who studies the history of life on Earth by analyzing fossil records. Anyway, back to Godzilius. It's almost 7 feet in length and 9 feet tall if you were to measure it upright. This fossil is 450 million years old, coming from the time when Cincinnati was underwater. It might be a fossilized algae mat, but some scientists have different opinions. This is a massive tunnel found in South America. The tunnel is at least 8,000 to 10,000 years old. At first, researchers discovered a couple of colossal burrows. They were enormous and neatly constructed. Geologists were amazed, saying they had never seen such structures before. There's no known geologic process to explain their formation. I mean, researchers have known about the burrows since the 1930s, but back then they believed that these tunnels were just some sort of archaeological construction, until they discovered huge claw marks on the walls and ceiling. They reasoned that some extinct species could be the ones to have left these marks. Many geologists strongly believe they've found the burrows of giant ground sloths and armadillos. The structure is the largest known burrow from the Paleolithic age in the Amazon. Yet experts have many questions. How come such a deliberate-looking structure could form naturally? A researcher then discovered another strange cave. This one was hundreds of miles away from the massive tunnel. Fast forward, there are now more than 1,500 burrows from the Paleolithic age found in Brazil. What's even more interesting is that some of these caves are connected to tunnels that sometimes lead to chambers. I'll continue with a natural phenomenon. What if I told you that every year, especially in October, fireballs appear on the Mekong River in Thailand? According to legends, Naga fireballs are a call for Buddha to return to Earth, and river serpents are the ones making these calls. Well, that's a myth, but what does science say about it? Is it related to a flammable gas? There are no clear answers yet. These fireballs appear to rise from the water. They can go as high as almost 990 feet. They're like fireworks, disappearing rapidly. They typically glow with a reddish or orange color. I'll mention some legends too, because why not? They're thrilling. And it would be a shame not to include the one about the lost city of Atlantis. As you may know, the legend says that Atlantis submerged into the ocean around 11,000 years ago. Since then, not just scientists, but also treasure hunters and philosophers have been searching for the lost world. Could Bimini Road be a trace? In 1968, a diver found strange stones off the coast of North Bimini Island in the Bahamas. The stones look human-made. It's like they were evenly spaced out and laid in an orderly row. It baffled scientists, but not for long. Carbon dating analysis of the blocks revealed that geological forces created the road naturally. There weren't any tool marks or signs indicating that the blocks had been stacked or something. The research is continuing, but yeah, scientists generally believe that the rocks were created by erosion. Well, I guess the time of Atlantis hasn't come yet. Okay, picture this. You're wandering on the beach, and you see dozens of octopuses walking past. In 2017, a group of people from Wales witnessed exactly this. Why did these creatures come out of the ocean? No one knows the answer. The group reported that they had seen 20 to 30 octopi crawling on the sand. The people looked for some signs of injury, but found nothing. They said that they had carried the animals back to the ocean. Interestingly, these creatures kept crawling onto the shore when people were asleep. Experts say that it's hard to be sure of the reason that pushed the animals to the beach without conducting a physical examination. They're still speculating about the reason behind this unusual and rare occurrence. Could it be overcrowding? Furthermore, the octopi were well armed. A separate study points out that the more fishers hunt large animals that feed on octopuses, the more the octopus population grows. Maybe that's why these creatures have to go farther to find food or shelter. But without proper research, these are only theories. There's a lot we don't know about space, too. So here's a bonus fact about the yellowish source of life in the solar system. Scientists have discovered a new type of wave inside the sun. These waves move in the opposite direction to the sun's rotation. Plus, they move super fast. So fast that it's beyond our understanding. Researchers have different theories about the function of the waves. If they figure out their role, this could give them additional insight into the processes happening inside the sun. And yes, the octopi were well armed.